Yeah, I just came in from Cleveland. I am the head of Hawkins School. It's a day school in Cleveland with about 1,300 kids, preschool through grade 12 on 4 campuses scattered all through our city. I'm here because I had a chance to get to know Jeff a while back and was completely captivated by the vision of his school. And I'm here because I need schools like his. I run a school that's 100 years old, and I have a lot of things I could tell you about my school I'm extraordinarily proud of. But I'm trying to retool it as fast as I can, and I can't get there as fast as he can. I need proof of concepts in the world to help me show my faculty, show my parents, show my students what it ought to look like. Here's one of my theses. I think character is nothing more than the set of your applied human relational skills. And those skills can be taught, and those skills can be taught in school. Not entirely. If the parents aren't teaching the same kinds of skills at home, it ain't going to stick. But if you're a parent, you send your child to a school, and you want them to become the kinds of adults you just articulated, wouldn't it make a lot of sense if they spent some time in school doing the things that help support those things? I have yet to see how the advanced placement curriculum helps teach empathy. I've been doing this for 31 years. I can't actually think of one example of how the advanced, except the teachers who are empathetic about all the work they have to pile on kids when they break down and start crying. That's about the only place I see empathy being taught in the advanced placement curriculum in this country. So I'm going to preach a little bit to the converted. I think I heard a little bit about you guys, so we'll see. But I want to do the short history of education in under 2 minutes, because it's relevant. Prior to what we would call formal education, every human learned the same way every other mammal on the planet learned, which was through apprenticeship. You were given skills, just like a little tigress or a foal, to do by some other mammal that had more skills. And you were given really simple tasks to do, then you were given slightly more complex tasks to do, then you were given really complex to do, and then there was some sense of passing it back on, that once you became masterful, you were expected to pet it. It all started to change in the 15th century. Latin grammar schools were developed literally to teach clerics and monks and priests to translate the Word of God literally, consistently, and precisely so that people could read it. This is before the printing press. So that system of education had at its highest ethic conformity. Getting it right, getting it the exact same every time. And then the big disaster. Cambridge adopted that method of instruction, Cambridge University in London, and it became kind of the method of instruction for the entire Western world, starting in the 15th century. Then the academies prior to that, the only people who were really educated, formally educated, were the affluent, and they were educated one-on-one with tutors. And one-on-one through apprenticeship. So the most influential, affluent, and credible people in Europe started to use this Latin grammar school model, and it became part of the academies model. So after the academies model, what we saw in parts of the world was what we would call the agrarian model. And the agrarian model was basically a limited education up to about 6th grade, and it was necessary because the rural people had more interactions with the markets. They had to be able to do numbers. They had to be able to read and write, or else they got taken advantage of when they took their product to market. So the idea was, as long as you can get enough to sort of not get hammered in the market, that's all you really needed. And then the Industrial Revolution took over, and a bunch of things happened all at the same time. One is the idea of compulsory education, asking students to go, everyone to be educated, took over the Western world, that we were going to try to educate everybody. And in the United States, it got compounded by the fact that hundreds of thousands of immigrants were coming over at the same time. We had a volume issue. We had all these people that we were now committing to educate, and we had to do it efficiently. What does industry do beautifully? Create efficient machines. So we created a system of educating kids where the central ethic was efficiency. The central ethic of mastery and apprentice is mastery, of working until you get it right. We replace that with working as fast as you can. And what happens on an assembly line when you put a piece of raw material on the assembly line, right? and it's particularly unusually shaped, pretty much it gets kicked out by quality control. It's broken. It didn't take. There was also an ethic somewhere around that time that children were empty vessels and that we filled them. And the ones that held the knowledge, they were the prized ones. The ones who didn't, the ones who leaked, well, they were broken. There were a group of educators in the late 19th century, the most famous of which are John Dewey and Maria Montessori, that said, wait a second, this whole industrial thing, this is crazy. We need to educate the whole child. We need to think about giving them real-world experiences. They basically came up with the right answer, but they lost the debate to modern education because we started to believe that the way to improve schooling was through standard measures and accountability that comes with it. And there were 4 really important steps to the dangerous paradigm that we have wrapped education in this world, for the most part, around. In 1894, 10 really influential college presidents wrote a document basically telling high schools, this is what we want you to teach. Guess what? See if this sounds familiar. Biology, chemistry, physics, English, history, foreign language. Does that sound familiar?
Thus far.
That was not the case prior to 1894. There were all sorts of interdisciplinary classes being taught in colleges and universities all over the world until the Committee of 10. They decided what a liberal education was, and they said it's content knowledge. That's what we want you to do. That made some sense in the 19th century, didn't it? Because you couldn't run to an expert or a library. You needed to know stuff. I have in my pocket over there the worst piece of technology the 5-year-olds in my school will ever see, which also contains probably about 80% of all the information available in the world, anytime I want it. That's kind of a game changer. Also, Mount Holyoke decided to differentiate themselves. They created letter grades. Mount Holyoke University created ABCD letter grades in 1897. Shortly thereafter, a graduate student in Kansas created the Kansas Silent Reading Test, which was the first multiple choice test ever. A few years later, the SAT Foundation was formed and adopted that test, multiple choice test, as the way to gain entry into the most selective colleges in the United States. Guess what? The guy who created the Kansas Silent Reading Test was a guy named Frederick J. Kelly. He spent the rest of his life protesting multiple choice tests. He said, this was a terrible form of testing. This was just a graduate school paper. I just wrote a paper to say if we need an efficient way, and he literally, this is what he said, to test lower order thinking for the lower orders. This was a test to sort out people on the lower end of the IQ scale. It was designed specifically for that by this man. He spent the rest of his life protesting and died in anguish because of what he saw had become of the multiple choice test. It is a horrible form of testing. And we measure everything with it. And students judge their worth in the world based on the results that come out of that form of testing. And by the way, I can back up everything I say with data and facts and studies. It's just those of you who... So we have all these sacred cows that came out of the system. Separate academic departments, cohorting kids by age, having classrooms defined as a place where we all go, single content areas, honors classes, class sizes, schedules, all these things. And mostly they're bad for children. Not all children all the time. It's good for some children most of the time. But it's bad for a lot of our children most of the time. This is one of my favorite quotes. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. I'm no longer in a purple state. I can apply this to our political system right now, I guess, since I'm in a blue state. But it definitely applies to our educational system. Let me talk about the absurdities. Carleton University, I didn't go there, but I pick on them because I happen to remember how they're ranked. They're the 8th ranked liberal arts college according to U.S. News and World Report. What do you think would happen at Carleton if Carleton all of a sudden dropped from 8th to 15th?
Everybody get fired.
There'd be an emergency board meeting. The Board of Trustees would have a meeting where that's all they talked about. What are the metrics that get you up and down this list? What are the most powerful metrics that U.S. News... By the way, this is a magazine that no longer exists as a magazine. SAT scores? What else? GPA, a little less, actually, than you'd think. What else?
Salary, exiting.
Earning potentials on the best.
Nope.
No, president report.
Nope, not as much.
Admissions rate.
Selectivity. How many kids you turn down is 12% of their metric. So if you're a college admission dean and you have goals set by the president of the university, how high is your admit rate? Having a low percentage of the kids who get in on the things that keep you employed if you're a VP for enrollment management at a highly selective college. It's number one. So you have colleges all over the world hyperinflating their inquiry and applicant pools to suppress and lower every single year. My 3 sons go to Colorado College, either graduated or going to Colorado College. The first thing out of the president of Colorado College's mouth when we got to the new parents is, congratulations, you guys came in the most selective class ever. You're awesome. First thing she said. She's a nice lady and she's doing a great job running the university. I don't have a thing against her. The College Board. The College Board is technically a nonprofit. It is a monopoly. I asked the president of the College Board, I said, why do you time tests? And I said, before you answer, don't tell me cost. My parents alone will subsidize everybody else for 3 more extra hours if they could just buy it. If it's the cost of proctors, I promise you that most of the parents who pay for this will pay an extra 30 or 40 bucks to have the proctor stay an extra 3 hours. If you really just want to know what kids know, why do you time these tests? And the only answer they had is, well, because there's time tests in college sometimes. I also asked, I said, why do you have AP tests in May? Every high school in America hates you for that. It screws up our calendar. We basically have a month of the end of school that's completely useless in an AP class. Why do you do that to us? Why can't we have APs on demand? And don't say test security, because that's BS, and you know it as well. And he said, well, it's convenient to them, was the real answer. So these are our monopolies. There's a whole bunch of other things. I'm going to do a number on letter grades in a second. But the biggest problem is that we have schools that are modeled after factories. And we also issue credit for how long you sat somewhere. Did you ever notice that on your transcript, the Carnegie unit really just represents how long you happen to sit somewhere? You get a credit for a C- and an A. You get a credit basically just for being exposed to history for a year. And this is really pernicious as well. We tell kids, no, have a balanced life. But boy, you better have an internship in the summer, you better have 3 co-curriculars, and you better have 5 APs. There is no, and I've talked to probably at this point 20 or 30,000 people, and I've made this statement, and I've challenged people to say this. There is no research to support letter grading. There's no educational research to support it as a valid educational practice, and we use it to measure everything. There's a ton of research, and that's it, that refutes it. And even if you believed in letter grading, if you're like, I don't believe you, Scott, I don't see a problem with letter grading, you have to concede that it's a 5-point scale where C is supposed to be the midpoint of the scale. That is no longer true. This is a great book from a former Yale professor who did a complete rant on basically the kind of kids he was seeing. He's like, I'm seeing these automatrons who are great at memorizing and regurgitating, but they can't think. And this was Yale. Look at the GPA drift. In 1960, 2.5 was the average GPA. It's 3.4. It's 45%. The next slide is to refute my friends my friends in independent schools who can get a little full of themselves. Here's the independent school trend. This is my school, Hawken, and a group of 54 of the largest day schools in the United States. In 1999, 30% of the grades we issued were A's. It's over 50% now. So in American high schools, there are only 2 grades, A and not A. I talk to educators all the time. I said, raise your hand if you've seen a kid cry when they get an A-. Every hand in the room goes up. I'm a teacher. I have high expectations. When I give a kid an A-, what I think I'm saying to them is, good job, really close, keep trying. That's what I think I'm saying. You know what they hear? I can't believe I got an A-. What did I do wrong? That's what they hear. Raise your hand if you would enjoy a job that sounded like this. So you go to work every day, and your work is broken up into 7 separate things. You never get to combine them. You just do them separately. They're never one project. You know, you do your writing first, and then you move rooms, and then you do your quantitative analysis, and then you move rooms, right? And every single time you produce something, you get judged on a 5-point scale. And then ultimately, that'll be used to compare you against your coworkers. for the thing you want most in the world, the promotion you're really dying for. Raise your hand if that was the ethic of the company I just invited you to join, if you would work for me. That's what I thought. We do that to kids every day, and we do it, by the way, in some schools from kindergarten on. Every day, in every school, all the time. We judge kids constantly. So this whole system, which is the reward system that the schools in this country who have kids who hope to go to college are based on, is deeply flawed. And here's the reason there's hope. The people in it know it too. They want to change too. They're not happy with it either. They're not thrilled with what they're having to do in order to make this work. So we have partners on the other side, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what's happening to our kids right now? This is independent schools. These are 14,000 kids in private schools like mine. Private schools like mine, independent schools, represent 1% of all the kids in the United States. These are kids who have, arguably, on average, a very fine education. They're spending more than 50% of the kids are spending more than 3 hours a night on homework. By the way, that includes, in some schools, mandatory sports. So you have to go to sports and play a game in sports, and then you have your 3 hours of homework after it. So the American Academy of Pediatrics says that 9th and 10th graders should have 9 hours of sleep, and juniors and seniors should have 8.5 hours of sleep. Only 8% of the kids in our schools get the required amount of sleep, and that's assuming that they're all juniors and seniors. We have little zombies walking around our high schools, completely sleep deprived every day. If you read any studies on what sleep deprivation does to both a developing body and mind, it's terrifying. So we have these atrocities we're committing, not because we don't love these kids, but because we're wrapped around a paradigm that requires it of us. And we think we're doing the best we can with them. Incredible pressure on the kids, particularly the ones who have high ambitions. A complete disconnect between what they want to learn and what we're teaching them. We have a whole system based on rewards and punishments, and the research on that is pretty compelling. As soon as you take a punishment away, whatever it was motivating goes away as well. And we're creating a generation of neurotic perfectionists, frankly. Don't take my word for it. Here's the dean at Stanford in 2006. Increasingly, we are seeing students struggling with mental health concerns ranging from self-esteem issues, developmental disorders, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, self-mutilation behaviors, and suicide behaviors. These are the winners. Stanford's the most selective university in the country. These are the kids who won. So Harvard, too many of our students, perhaps after a year or two, spent using college as a treadmill, wake up in crisis, not knowing. And these aren't some low-level professors. These are the deans of the most prestigious universities in the world, talking about what's happening to the kids that they're receiving. This is a survey in 2010 of 95,000 college students in 140, give or take, colleges. Students reported experiences within the last 12 months, quote, feeling things were hopeless, 46%. Feeling overwhelmed by all you had to do, 85%. Feeling exhausted but not from physical activity, 80%. Feeling very lonely, 56%. Feeling very sad, 61%. Felt so depressed it was difficult to function, 31%. Feeling overwhelming anxiety, 48%. Feeling overwhelming anger, 38%. And that's the tip of the iceberg. Below the surface of kids who are showing visible distress, we have kids who are stressed and disengaged and overwhelmed. 88% of independent school heads said that anxiety is a common issue at their school. 49% said that major depression is an increasing problem in their schools. And what's driving it? In 1990, 9% of all the kids applied to 7 or more colleges. By 2016, 29%, 1/3 of the kids are applying to more. I had a girl, and I'm not making this up, this is not an apocryphal story. She's a student I taught. She asked me for a college recommendation, and I always make the kids come in and interview with me before I write them a recommendation. And I asked her to list, I said, how many colleges are you applying to? She said, oh, kind of a lot. And I said, what's a lot? She said, I don't know, like 14 or 15. I said, well, list them for me. And I looked up at her and I said, you just listed 21 colleges. She goes, really? She applied to 21 colleges. So what happens is that as the kids apply to more colleges, there's more rejections. As there's more rejections, the kids feel like they have to apply to more colleges. And guess who profits? The vice presidents of enrollment management who get to keep their jobs as the admit rates drop. That's the problem. So what we've created is a completely unnatural system. Anybody who's into biomimicry knows that it's really hard to beat millions of years of evolution in terms of doing things the right way. We are biologically pre-programmed by millions of years of evolution. Kids, you don't have to teach kids to be curious, I promise. If you doubt that, walk onto a playground anytime you want and watch what the kids do. They're learning constantly. We also don't have to teach kids to go do and build and create and generate. Generative creative thinking that all the entrepreneurs in this room are really proud of, I'm sorry, you were born with it. The fact that we didn't screw it up in school is somehow you escaped. You're some of the people who actually escaped. Congratulations. And then the last one is guidance from older people. We are biologically programmed to survive, to have our genes passed along, to look up to people who are more knowledgeable and say, well, help me, right? So we don't have to teach that. What we're not wired to do is sit and listen while other people talk, what I'm doing to you right now. Sorry about that. We're also not wired for one set of expectations for everybody. Last I checked, every kid comes out kind of a little different. We're also not wired for achievement on the clock. We're wired for mastery, to keep working until we're good at things. The sense of accomplishment, I promise you that if I asked you, what are you most proud of? Once we got past the humans in your life that you helped, right? Your kids, we set those aside. At the base of every narrative I would hear in this room is mastery. You worked really hard, and then something you really worked hard on became true, and you were the reason. We are wired to want that sense of agency and a choice, and we've almost completely removed it from school, except in one place, co-curriculars. So I talk to the kids. I give the kids at Hawken an exit interview every year, and I say, in groups of 6 to 8, and I say, okay, this is the one question I ask every year. Tell me when you were fully engaged at my school, at Hawken. And guess what they list? Theater, sports, debate, robotics. It's not their classes. So what is natural is apprenticeship. When I talk about the apprenticeship model of instruction, I'm talking about what the Ocean School is getting ready to try to build, which is kids going out into the world, finding really interesting, complex problems with mentors and adults who have a lot of knowledge around them, and being asked to try to fix them and solve them and dive into those problems, that messy ambiguity. If I would rank order all the things we don't teach kids that they really need, here's the number one thing. We don't teach them how to deal with ambiguity. This is a very pre-programmed system that as soon as you learn the game, if you just keep playing the game long enough, and that's what gets rewarded. Guess what real life is? It's a big, messy, ambiguous thing that you have to figure out. And we don't actually give kids enough opportunity. The irony is they actually love it. They love being thrown in the middle of a messy problem and say, hey, why don't the four of you try to figure this out? And if you doubt that, get a Lego robotics set without any instructions and say, see if you can get these to battle. And if for fun, say you got 45 minutes and watch what happens. And you don't need a teacher to see. And they'll have their little robots duking it out in 45 minutes. So the apprenticeship model is the right way to teach, which is based on mastery and not time. So my school, which is a 100-year-old prep school, which is progressively flavored but reasonably traditional, I've spent 11 years trying to get everybody to go in this direction, and we're there. I have board approval to create a second high school at Hawken, a laboratory high school that runs parallel to our existing high school. I knew that we couldn't just retool our current high school. There were too many stakeholders. But I did get permission, so we bought a new house. We bought a property in the city of Cleveland, 15 miles from our high school, in the Grease Center. And I have permission to create about a 150-student high school that is appendaged to it. And this is what it would look like. The reason I'm here is it looks an awful lot like the Ocean School. And I haven't been able to build this yet. I'm getting there, but I haven't been able to build it. So I don't believe we can fix the existing model. I actually think we have to create brand new models that increasingly, as they become proof of concepts, as they become real, as they become seen, as they become credible, as they get kids into selective colleges, start to look like an alternative. And then I think humanity will run to that alternative. And then you will have the legislative will, the political will, the financial capital to support that. So a group of schools and I founded this consortium. It's brand new. It's only 4 months old. And we're trying to do something. We're trying to change the American high school transcript. The biggest problem right now, I think, the biggest boulder, there's a lot of boulders right now, but the biggest boulder for schools that are college prep schools, and that doesn't really matter whether you're public, private, parochial, or charter, but if the vast majority of your kids have college aspirations, the biggest boulder is the translation of your achievement in high school to colleges. That needle, that hole in the needle that we have to push kids through is shaving off all their humanity. So we needed to have a better way to present them to colleges that isn't gaming the system, that's actually more authentic. So we're going to try to create one. But like anything else, when you're in a subordinate relationship, right, you have no real power. The only way to get power is to aggregate. So basically we're unionizing the private schools in the United States to say to the colleges, look, we want your partnership, but we're not actually asking for permission. And so we've aggregated some of the most influential schools in the United States: Andover, Dalton, Spence, Lakeside, Punahou, Cranbrook, on one end of the spectrum. And then we have 5 schools, Ocean's one of them, that have 0 students, that are brand new startup schools. Because Andover isn't going to lead the revolution. I worked at Andover, so I can pick on them. They're not going to lead the revolution. You're an Andover grad, yeah? Right? They're probably, while they will add a lot of value, you know the faculty there, right? They're not going to be the first to have an ungraded transcript, fair to say, right? You might get there a lot faster. So we need each other. So we have about 134 schools that have joined. We have another 142 that have given some indication that they want to join us in this effort. So we announced ourselves as a real partner. The good news is we haven't been shut down. Quite the contrary. We have the provost at Georgetown. We have the dean of admission at Case. We have the president of Reed College. We have the president of Claremont McKenna College have joined our advisory committee to be part of this conversation. They want to change the system too, and this might be the way to do it. So one of the things that's on there is, so just to give you a sense, what are we talking about? Right now, your transcript is a piece of paper. It's a flat file. Every single college in the United States reads their files electronically. So why does your transcript have to be a flat file? Why can't it be something, if you click on a credit, it takes you to the standard. If you click on the standard, it actually takes you to a portfolio full of student work product and teacher recommendations. Now, will the colleges dive 2 levels down? No, not for about 90% of their kids, but when they need to, they can. If all that database follows their transcript, why do you need teacher recommendations anymore? You just query the database, and it'll pull out all the teacher recommendations. So we're talking about getting rid of the transcript and replacing it, frankly, with a layered database-supported website. Every transcript is a website representing the kid's achievement. And the one we really like right now, this is not final. We haven't built this, so don't say this is what it is, but it's as close as the one we've handed out. So what does this look like? So imagine that right here you have a list of earned credits. They're mostly skills. If you look at the list, they're mostly skills. There's things like detect bias and distinguish between reliable and unsound information, analyze and create credits and knowledge. But here's the trick. We are not creating these. You are, and I am. The credits at Hawken will be completely different than the credits at the Ocean School. We will create our own credits with our own standards, and we hold the kids to those standards. So we are unstandardizing the crediting system in the United States. And by doing that, we can do some really cool things. This is live. You click on any one of these feature credits, it takes you to a page that shows the best work that that kid has curated that represents leading through influence. Well, what does leading through influence mean? You click on it, here's a portfolio page showing here's the evidence and the quotes and things from people leading through evidence. You click on any one of those pie charts. This one is 3 is leadership and teamwork, and it takes you to the credits that represent leadership and teamwork. So we're not hiding anything. In fact, we're showing the whole child, and we're crediting, and here's what we're crediting. Right now, the only thing you get credit for is content knowledge and a hint that you learned some skills. There are no skills represented on a traditional transcript, just content knowledge. Now, if you pass US history with a good grade, theoretically, we suspect you know how to write historically, but there's no actual credit. Now we can actually give a credit for historical research. We can give a credit for, we can even do knowledge, chemistry knowledge. You can get a credit for that. But we can also give a credit for empathy, teamwork, resilience, persistence, integrity. We can give a transcript credit for those characteristics. By the way, this is where I'm going to end, the exact same characteristics that you told me you wanted your children to achieve when we started this conversation. We can actually credit them. Guess what? If you credit something, you assess it. If you assess it, you teach to it. So that's what we're trying to do. We're thrilled to have the Island School as one of our potential lead horses to get out in front of the rest of us. But I believe we're going to actually show kids the way they should be in 3 dimensions in all their humanity colleges. And then they can still decide which ones they want. And that's their right. We're not trying to argue that. And why? This is a survey that IBM did of 1,200 CEOs in the United States asking, what do you want from the people who come to you? It sounds just like what you asked for, right? So not only is it what parents want, it's actually what employers want. They want human relational skills, creativity, global thinking, influence. They didn't say US history knowledge. Some did, college professor. Those of you who work in this know this very well. This is even an old study. This shows which jobs have the greatest likelihood of being completely replaced by computers. Anything that's routine. Guess what's routine? Rote memorization of content knowledge and regurgitating it on command. That's a pretty routine skill. And there's a whole, this is not specific to us, the whole world is waking up to the fact that this paradigm has to shift, and it has to shift now. But to do that, we need lead horses. We need schools to go first, because all of the rest of us, the established independent schools, the parochial schools, the public schools, even the charter schools that aren't brand new, are encumbered. We're all tied down. We're all wrapped around the wrong paradigm. And we're unwrapping as fast as we can, but it's not fast enough to save this generation of kids. I've told the parents at my school about the mastery transcript. I said, if your kid's not in 5th grade or lower, you'll never see this. I'm sorry. It's going to take me 6 or 7 years to get this built.